This government, as promised, has maintained the closest surveillance of the Soviet military buildup on the island of Cuba. Within the past week, unmistakable evidence has established the fact that a series of offensive missile sites is now in preparation on that imprisoned island.
On the morning of the 14th of October, 1962, two American U-2 spy planes reported to have seen nuclear missile sites in construction in Cuba. This led to a 12-day standoff where the U.S. and USSR were at the brink of nuclear war. We refer to these 12 days as the Cuban Missile Crisis. After the Cuban Revolution in 1959, Fidel Castro rose to power and developed a close relationship with the Soviet Union after many years. He and Cuba depended highly on the Soviet Union in terms of economic aid, as well as military aid. At that time, the US and USSR were involved in the Cold War, a 46-year proxy war. The US and USSR were not the best of friends, as they constantly had competition, should it be technological, economical, in sports, in politics, etc. Their ideologies pushed them to becoming rivals, because their way of thinking was too different. The Soviet Union was communist while the US was capitalist, which also made it difficult for them to work together. President Khrushchev took action after NATO planted their nuclear missiles in Turkey. At the end of July, more than 60 military ships belonging to the USSR were on their way to Cuba, with some carrying military weapons. One of the main reasons why the Soviet Union sent missiles to Cuba was because they felt paranoid about being in the radar of so many missiles belonging to the US and NATO. They sent the missiles in order to level the playing field. When the U-2 spy planes had reported the nuclear sites being built, President Kennedy was informed 2 days later, which started the crisis on the 16th of October 1962, and lasted 12 days. The installment of missiles was top priority for the U.S. because of how close they were to them. They came up with a plan to attack the missile site in Cuba using their own missiles and invading Cuba. But President Kennedy decided on a more rational decision, which was to send many Navy ships to form a naval quarantine around the island of Cuba to ensure that the Soviet Union didn't transport anything else. On the 23rd and 24th of October, President Khrushchev sent letters to President Kennedy informing him that the missiles were not to deploy, and explaining the peaceful intentions of the USSR. After 2 days, President Kennedy received another letter from President Khrushchev offering to remove their missiles from Cuba if the U.S. could guarantee that they would not attack Cuba, and that they would remove their missiles from Turkey. The crisis ended on the 28th of October 1962 with President Kennedy agreeing to these terms and Cuba being pushed towards communism.
Said, "Comrades, Lenin's legacy is lost. Some of you already know and some don't. We have brought our missiles to Cuba as agreed with Comrade Castro, and President Kennedy has just sent us an ultimatum to remove our missiles from Cuba immediately."